Today's episode is brought to you by Microsoft Dragon Copilot, your AI assistant for clinical documentation and workflow. To learn about how Dragon Copilot can transform the way you work, stick around after the episode or visit aka.ms/knock-knock-hi. That's aka.ms/knock-knock-hi.
Knock, knock. Hi.
Hello, welcome to Knock Knock Hi with the Glockenfleckens. Over here we have Krista Flannery, also known as Lady Glockenflecken.
And you are Will Flannery, also known as Dr. Glockenflecken.
Thank you for joining us we have a special guest.
Yes.
But a very high-powered,
Yes.
very
Accomplished.
accomplished.
Articulate.
What are the words? Yeah.
What are some other A words?
You're better with words, I think, than I am. We are talking to Dr. Jillian Horton. She's a specialist, internal medicine trained physician, and associate professor of the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada. She is an author, an award-winning medical educator, writer, musician, and we didn't even get into the musician.
I know. Very multifaceted.
Absolutely. And she has done a ton of work on wellness, and we talk about what wellness really means, because I mentioned at the beginning that people feel like starting to roll their eyes a bit at the term wellness because it's just thrown around.
Burnout.
But she has a
resilience.
fantastic perspective about it and how we can actually make morale better in healthcare.
Yeah.
Which we all need to be working toward because we want people to stick around in healthcare.
Yes. And she takes more of an evidence-based approach rather than a pizza-based approach.
I like that. Yeah. Less of the pizza-based approach. That's good. And she's written a wonderful book, We Are Perfectly Fine, which is a memoir of love, medicine, and healing. Very informative and lots of great stories as well.
Yeah.
I love how she
treasure
relates.
trove.
She relates stories to and evidence. Like she blends all of this together in a very compelling speaker. And I could have listened to her for hours.
Yeah, me too.
So anything else? Let's see. She's done. She does a lot of speaking, and she's got a second book she's working on. So
right.
it's just so busy doing all the things. So let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. Here we go, Dr. Jillian Horton.
So, Will.
Yeah.
You're always teaching me things about Demodex mites, your little friends there. But let's switch things up a bit.
Okay.
How about I ask you a couple questions to see how much you really know?
Go for it.
Okay. Let's do it. What are the only two main species of Demodex mites found in humans?
Oh, type 1 and type 2?
Gotcha on that one. Demodex follicularum, which are found in the eyelash follicles, and Demodex brevis, which are found in the meibomian glands.
Impressive. All right, next question.
Why do people with Demodex blepharitis often feel itchy eyelids first thing in the morning?
I know this because I use it to gross you out. Demodex mites avoid light, and they come out mostly at night to mate and move between your eyelash follicles. So many people will wake up with that itchy, irritated feeling along their eyelids.
So gross.
I'm surprised you even brought that up.
I know. I'm just trying to get used to these mites since Demodex blepharitis is such a common disease and we keep talking about it.
Well, that's a big step. And we know there's a prescription eye drop available to treat Demodex blepharitis. To learn more about these mites and Demodex blepharitis, visit miteslovelids.com for more information. Again, that's miteslovelids.com to learn more. This ad is brought to you by Tarsus Pharmaceuticals. All right, we are here with Dr. Jillian Horton. Jillian, thank you so much for joining us.
It is an absolute pleasure. I'm so happy to be here with both of you.
Can I just throw something out to start here? Because we're gonna talk a lot about like the whole idea around wellness. We're gonna talk about humor and maybe some advocacy, just all the things that warm my heart and Kristen's heart. But real quick, hear me out on this. All right, medical comedy fellowship. What do you think? We got.
I
Yeah. What do you think? Good.
Well, it's going to be intense.
We got
and
courses on costume procurement. We got a little sessions on stereotypes. I don't know. It's just an idea.
I think it's really good, and
You don't have to lie to me. That's okay.
No, I do, and I think think of how good we get at dealing with rejection and fellowship already. So the level of being able to deal with jokes falling flat, the audience walking out on you. I mean, people are going to have a pretty thick skin for this fellowship. I'm excited to work on it with you both.
As an like an internal medicine trained physician, I think there are probably a lot of internists who could use a little resiliency training around having their jokes fall flat.
No, it is devastating. I mean, let's be honest.
Especially on rounds, it's,
we've all been there.
A joke falls flat on rounds, and then you have to just sit there with it for like another 6 hours until rounds ends.
You were doing the walk of shame to the nursing station, and
rough.
It's following you.
All right, so if there's anybody we should be talking about wellness with, it's probably you. With your experience, it's phenomenal. All the education that you've done. I mean, you've written a book around kind of this idea and a lot to do with this.
And lived experience.
Exactly.
It's also its own education.
But can I just, here's where I'd like to really start is, and it may sound silly to just ask this, but what exactly is wellness? And the reason I ask this is because I feel like this gets thrown around a lot.
It's become a buzzword.
It's a buzzword.
Totally.
And I think to a lot of people, they're starting to roll their eyes a bit. Like, oh, okay,
Agreed.
Wellness. Like, oh, great.
Totally.
Like this, what?
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're so aware of the idea of wellness that it's starting to lose its meaning. So can you just help people, like, put this into perspective for people?
Yeah.
Why is it so important for healthcare?
Yeah. You make me think of, just other buzzwords, right? And how neatly they fit into this model. We're burnt out on burnout. We need psychological safety from psychological safety. And now, we need
resiliency is another one. Resiliency.
Resiliency,
Yeah.
the dirty, horrible R word that is so overexposed, right? But, it's interesting. There's so many different ways that people look at this, as we know, right? We can look at wellness as it's more than the absence of disease. It's more than the absence of pathology. It's more than just escaping environments that make us unwell or taking great vacations. We know it's, there's this definition of resilience that we sometimes talk about, bouncing back or moving through things, having difficult experiences at the lowest psychological cost. But when I think of wellness, I guess one of the things that when I talk to healthcare worker groups about it, where I usually end up is talking about fulfillment. Because wellness, I think it's a really actually surprisingly complex question. What does it mean to be well? It's not a fixed state. We have lots of times during the day, we do a biopsy of the moment. How are you? Actually, right now, I suck. It's awful. A couple hours later, it's pretty good. But, I love instead looking more at what is the experience that so much of our wellness dialogue tries to capture when we're talking about our identities as physicians. And I often land on fulfillment. And I didn't come up with that, of course. The Stanford Professional Fulfillment Model is the model that really focuses on the idea of fulfillment as being a marker of, a sense of well-being, a sense of contentment, a sense of purpose and meaning being present in our life. So that's almost where I start, because I think when we talk in professional circles about wellness, well, then we get into a lot of other things that, yes, they apply to everybody, nutrition and sleep and all these other things that, maybe our approach is more general there, like other people's. But I think that fulfillment piece, we can really understand that from the point of view of our experience as physicians and healthcare workers and start to look at what is required in order to experience a fulfilling life in this work.
That is really interesting, too, because that might be part of the problem, right? Is because what fulfills someone is different from individual to individual.
Yes.
And that's very different from a medical diagnosis, which you guys are all trained in and taught to think that way of, there's these 5 symptoms and there's a checklist. Yes, 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 no, then okay, it's this. And individual fulfillment will be different for everybody. So, and I think that is why we end up on these general things, because you're trying to make it this prescriptive thing of, well, if you just get enough sleep and enough, good nutrition, then you should be fine. I don't know. It's on you, I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And by the way, come in on Saturday and we'll learn about this.
Exactly. For 5 mandatory hours.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this, and right before I started prepping for this interview with you, I went to a conference, an ophthalmology conference, and I go to a lot of conferences, and all these specialty organizations, they all seem to be worried about the same thing, and that's young members, like being engaged in the profession, and I can't help but try to connect the what we're talking about with fulfillment and with having people want to move, young people in particular want to move medicine forward and make it better and grow the profession, as opposed to just really just considering it as a job, which it is. It's a job. Yes. Medicine's a job, but also sometimes it does need to be a little bit more than that to try to fix the things that we need to fix in healthcare. So I'd like to talk a bit about the young folks, right? The residents, the med students, and what kind of work you've done around like medical education regarding fulfillment.
I love that question. And to go back to something you said, Kristen, sort of thinking about the complexity of looking at these issues, the desire that we have to provide simplistic frameworks, cookie cutter kind of ways of checklists, red, light, green, how are you doing? And that not even beginning to capture, what we all know is the very complex and nuanced nature of our experiences. So you just made me think of something. I was speaking at the International Conference on Physician Health in October, and a resident came up to me afterwards, and she said something so interesting. She said, she had read my book, and she shared with me that she'd really identified strongly with it. But she said, I sometimes wonder, I go to these conferences, and we have conversations about kind of the state of the union in healthcare, and I feel like so much of what we talk about is so negative. It's all negative. It's all burnout. It's all, hearing the horror stories and rightly, I mean, the experiences, the dark side of what we do needs a lot more airtime and sunlight than it's ever had before. But that was sort of one thing I found myself thinking about, the negativity bias in how we are so often talking, including in medical education, about our experiences these days. But you also made me think of something else, Will, that I often talk to residents about. Adam Grant, years ago, before he was kind of a household name, talked about, and I think he was one of the first people to frame it this way. So forgive me if somebody did this before him. But he talked about, 3 models for work. And one is exactly what you talked about. Model 1 is work as a job. Work is a means to an end. It's a paycheck that allows us to, pay for the things that we need just to live. Model 2 is it's a career. And in Model 2, that career model is a trajectory. It moves. We see the hope of an upward movement. And the third model is it's a calling. It's something that aligns deeply with us. Just as you said, there's a sense of who I am, what my deepest values are aligned with this thing that I'm doing. And I think one of my favorite messages to impart to medical students and residents, and also to faculty or sort of who are grappling, especially early faculty, with that, is that all there is kind of feeling. I think sometimes this mismatch of our expectations. We think it's a calling. It's going to feel like a calling every moment of the day. Or we think it's a career. I'm always going to be psyched about my career. I often tell medical students, if I look at every single day, I can find an hour where I say, this is a job. This filling out paperwork. I can, connect it to my mission and my personal fulfillment. But this is a job hour. And then I have other hours that are career hours. I see where I'm going. I see what I'm trying to build. spoiled. But then we have these moments as well, these hours, hopefully they're more than just fleeting moments, where it is a calling. It's so that sense of, again, I am here because of this moment. I am here to meet everything in my life kind of prepared me to be the person to be with this other person at this moment. And I think sometimes I often will use the analogy of, kind of the idea that we're going to have everything. Sometimes I think one of the problems we have is we want to have everything all at once. And it's like going to a really amazing restaurant and putting all 4 delicious courses into the Vitamix and then saying, this is disgusting. Why doesn't this taste better?
Right.
Maybe because we're just not dealing with what we've got in the right order, separating it, handling it in the right way. If only that were the only problem. It's clearly not. But again, thinking about what we can do, what we can control, how our perceptions influence things, to me, that's part of those solutions.
Yeah.
I love that framing of job versus career versus calling and how fluid it can be.
Right.
I've never really thought about it in that way, but that's absolutely true. Like when you're sitting there, as a med student trying to just throw your first suture, or you're being asked as a resident. I was, I would be asked to just suture up this incision. You're sitting there for an hour doing that kind of just feels like a job. But then when you're having you're telling a patient they have cancer, or you're sharing an intimate moment with a patient that, it does change. It no longer is just a job. This is a very important moment in your life and in the patient's life. And it's, what really bothers me that I see on social media is almost weaponizing the idea of medicine as a calling in order to make people feel like if they don't feel that way, it's not professional.
Yes, they're deficient.
To exploit them, right? It's the same. We see this in education as well, right? You can pay teachers almost nothing because it's a calling, and look at this work that you're doing that is so important, right? It's it's a distraction to say
exactly
it's okay if you don't have great working conditions, residents, because this is a calling.
Because it's a calling, it doesn't mean you don't need to be treated well.
Right.
Exactly. It's just it's a total exploitation in many cases of that altruistic quality that brings so many people into our midst, our nursing colleagues, our allied healthcare colleagues, our fellow physicians. We've seen, and I love how you framed that altruism, that good instinct, weaponized against people, and sort of, your best quality becoming your greatest weakness, because it means that that sometimes organizations know, health systems know, these people will never walk away. Except we are seeing, of course, since the pandemic, that's shifted to a more transactional quality. So many people, I think, have hit that final threshold where they say, I have seen that I don't feel aligned with this organization. I don't feel valued by the people around me, the organization that I'm working for. And so what happens? People become transactional and they shift. And I think it's caught a lot of people by shock, because I don't think by surprise, pardon me, because I don't think we've seen this in our lifetimes in medical practice, the way that people are kind of going, you know what, that's it. This is just that job to me now, because you pushed me to the point where I had to pull that lever in order to save myself. And that's heartbreaking.
And when it becomes a job, now you're looking at, it's just reminding me of the same patterns that we're seeing in the workforce in general, right?
Yes.
Which is people used to stay in one career for their entire lives, one job even for their entire lives, and they'd get a pension at the end of it. And, and now with millennials and even more so, I think, with Gen Z, it's not like that. It's more like I have standards for how I want my life to be. And if this job doesn't allow me to have those standards, then I'm going to go find a different job that does. And so I think that problem is only, or at least that pattern is only going to continue as these younger people move up into the ranks of medicine.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And it kind of makes me think of your question a few minutes ago, Will, communicating and helping our learners and our early career colleagues navigate that challenge, because this is now their reality. This is how a lot of people around them are making decisions. And we all know there are some good things about it. I think we're all glad to see people finally starting to create some healthy boundaries, as long as it, anything can be taken to the extreme, of course, as we know. But we want people making this job as sustainable as possible within the confines of the complexity of what the job actually is. And so I think one of the ways that we can temper some of that is really, and again, this sort of traces back to literature and what we know about healthcare worker burnout, really hacking meaning. So people, again, are in a bit more of a transactional state, thinking about boundaries. But what we can do to enhance their experience is really help focus, help teach them, help create opportunities, in really sophisticated opportunities. And also, for organizations to really be living their values. So, what's the thing that's going to keep me coming back to a job if all things are equal? It's going to be, as we said, that sense of mission alignment. This place represents the things that I believe in. What I see around here is my heart in action. It's my deepest values. I see them reflected everywhere. That is a much harder thing for us to walk away from when we've had a taste of it. And I think, again, we're just seeing that loss of mission alignment for all kinds of reasons. So many of the reasons that the two of you speak out about so critically, in terms of, the incredible pressures that American physicians in particular deal with when it comes to dealing with the insurance piece and the healthcare system.
I don't like trying, putting so much pressure on the individual to fix their own burnout.
Right.
Totally.
That's just another task, and that's the last thing someone who's on the verge of quitting medicine needs is another task to try to
Well, and it's someone in a burning room, and you're telling them, just cool yourself down.
Yeah.
Just cool yourself down.
Yeah.
Don't burn.
Have you
let's get him out of the room. Have you tried?
Exactly.
Here's some pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Trying to address it on the organizational level and set the standard for working conditions and how the interaction between physicians and patients should be, and just making that a possibility.
Totally.
But man, it's so hard for that to happen, at least in the US.
It is so hard.
Lots of places.
And I love that you said that, because I often think of that as one of the critical disclaimers. So, my book is, a lot of it is about my own experiences with mindfulness and how mindfulness has made a huge difference to me personally, both as a clinician and as a human being. And so often when I go to speak, and I'm very fortunate I have the opportunity to work with all kinds of different groups now, people I think are sometimes, especially if they've never heard me talk before, they don't know anything about my work, they think I'm going to come and give that exact message that people so often give, that you said, Kristen, if you just take control of your life and breathe more deeply and accept what you can't control. Honestly,
you wear a series of crystals around your neck.
Yeah. Oh, you can't see them now because they're all off screen, but I'm big into the crystals. But it's one of the most important disclaimers, I think, is to anticipate what you both said, what people are used to hearing, and what are our learners and so many of our colleagues and us, what are we used to hearing? You need to be more resilient. That's not what the literature says. That's not correct. The literature tells us we are more resilient than age-matched controls. Literature tells us, as you know, that when medical students start medical school, they have better mental health than their age-matched peers. And by year 3, their mental health is worse. There's something about this work, something about this environment that we are profoundly affected by it. And so the disclaimer number 1 is exactly what you said. The literature tells us unequivocally organizational and system factors are the primary drivers of burnout, not our lack of mindfulness, not our lack of, engaging deeply with our sense of meaning and doing a gratitude journal and hell no. I mean, these are,
Yeah.
These are things that we have to separate them out, put them in a different basket and say, if we're going to talk about mindfulness, for example, if we're going to talk about things that we know actually do have some impact on our quality of life, they cannot be part of the organization saying, well, have you tried mindfulness to deal with your burnout? Like the organization, that's, I think, where we so often run into trouble. Cookie cutter solutions, as Tate Shanafelt, one of the world experts on physician health, often says, cookie cutter solutions don't work. They're often what are deployed by HR because they're easy, they're cheap, and then people feel that they're doing something, but they're radically ineffective because individually tailored things, just like you said at the beginning, Kristen, that's another saying that Tate Shanafelt has. If you've seen one unit, you've seen one unit.
Right.
So in every single context, every healthcare system, there are going to be general principles that apply, but the solutions in each place are going to be totally different. So starting from that place of saying, hey, the organization has to constantly be reflecting back to people anytime it's doing any work around burnout and healthcare worker well-being. This is what the literature tells us. We know it's not you. We're working on these components of the organizational problems. And then if we want to venture into the things that we, call physician-directed or individually directed initiatives, that has to be of our own volition. I think that's the key. And the reason I do believe there's a lot of merit in those things, actually, I see a strong parallel between, for example, me pursuing mindfulness or me writing mainstream media op-eds and the work that the two of you do. This is individually directed wellness. As I know you know it, but I know it too. I mean, what you're doing, it restores a locus of control. You kind of go, I am powerless to change A, B, C, D directly, but I can also influence it. I can find ways. And even though it doesn't change the system that we work in, it restores a sense of, I don't have zero agency. There are things that I can control. There are some things I can influence. And then there are some things about which I can do absolutely nothing. But that influence and control piece, really, this is where I think physicians, we often forget how much our voices get listened to, how much power we actually have when we do the kind of work that the two of you do, moving out in non-traditional ways into non-traditional spaces as ourselves saying difficult things. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Do you find organizations are receptive to that message?
That says it all right there.
Why did my body language say something different than my mouth?
Because I can totally see. I mean, maybe some are, but I could totally see how you're asking organizations hospital systems to change their way of thinking about this. They would love nothing more than to just put this on the individual to make themselves better.
Yeah.
And so, honestly, like how do you deal with that pushback?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I would start by saying, for sure, there are some organizations, some spaces, probably just like the two of you, that I'm invited into, places where I go and speak or do workshops or talks or things with leadership, where I say, wow, this organization is going to make progress in the next 10 years, I think. I don't know what it's going to look like, but their leadership gets it. There's buy-in. There's a structure to really look at serious change, and people are really literate. And I think that's one of the keys that I'm certainly not the first person to observe this, but it's a message that I internalized years ago from a Canadian colleague, an amazing internist and researcher into physician burnout long before it was like on the tip of all our tongues. Her name is Jane Lemaire. And one of the things that Dr. Lemaire taught me years ago is build literacy. And I have really become convinced, I think that's one of the best pieces of advice anyone has ever given me. Because so often we go to these organizations, and you've had this experience too, people start by saying, well, in question, the problem is these young people and blah, 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 and it's also this, and it's also this. And, beginning with, I always think about, how do we learn everything else? If you wanted to invite me to give grand rounds in ophthalmology, which would basically consist of there's a right and a left eye, that would be my level of expertise.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Throw out a little ODOS. I think you'll really, absolutely.
I don't know if it's the same south of the equator, but I never thought about it. But, the level of literacy is low. And one of the things I think we know, physicians don't like to look foolish. That's something that as type A++ people, we really struggle with. We always ask questions that we only know the answers to of our learners, and that kind of perpetuates into a way of life for many people. And so I think the right touch when we're going to go in and speak and work with groups, beginning, and again, it's why I like going back to the Stanford professional fulfillment model. That's become the way that I occupy this kind of really cool, neat, privileged, fun space in this world now of being a knowledge translator, figuring out how do I go in with a group that doesn't have high literacy, doesn't want to admit it, doesn't necessarily know that they don't have high literacy, and make them feel, not inferior, not talk down to them, spend an hour or a day with them so that they leave with a whole new understanding of even like just a framework. I always use the example of when we see a patient with abnormal kidney function and an elevated creatinine, it's drilled into us from week 1 of medical school. There's a way to think about this: pre-renal, post. So you got that high creatinine, which one of these things is it? And then you start, finessing from there. But one of the interesting things is, I think when it comes to healthcare worker well-being, many people have no such model. Now, there are many people who really have extremely sophisticated knowledge in this area and are leading the charge. But just as often, many of the people tasked with running systems and leadership actually, they don't have any kind of pre-renal post model when it comes to physician health. And so that's why I think sometimes they end up doing what exactly both of you have said. They're like, I don't know what to do about the system stuff. I don't even know how to describe it, but here's a yoga class, so nobody can accuse me of doing nothing. So they actually, I find there's a small percentage of people about whom I would say they're not receptive to this. A percentage of people who are just going to lecture us and say, you know what, this is just about you people not accepting how hard medicine is. And I had instruments thrown at me and it made me better. You don't actually know that. It's quite equally possible that it just maimed you severely, screwed you up, because you'll never know the alternate version of yourself. Right. So let's talk about your reasoning there as well. Yep. But most people I find with that kind of the touch that allows them to be a little bit vulnerable and say, I don't actually understand this. I could use a better framework. Teach me, hey, I get that. I can build on that. I can take that away, reinforce it, kind of spiral curriculumized it. I think there's an openness to that. And I think that's one place where we have a real opportunity to kind of impart knowledge in a way that we can think about how it's strategic. What is strategic for me to impart to a leader who wants to learn more, but just kind of feels like they don't know where to start? That, I always feel like that's my challenge. And I love that challenge of moving into that space.
I love that. Let's take a break. We'll come right back. Hey, Kristen.
Yeah.
If I could give one piece of advice to like brand new physicians or even like med students, early career folks, it would be to get yourself some life insurance.
Yes, that is the time to do it before you start having all sorts of health issues.
Like a cardiac arrest.
Or cancer.
Yeah, the cancer scares. It's just, you never know what can happen.
You don't.
Right? And so having that peace of mind, it's so helpful. And so let me tell you about Pearson Rabbits.
All right, tell me.
This is great. So this is a physician-focused, physician-founded company founded by Dr. Stephanie Pearson, a former OBGYN, and Scott Ravitz, who's an insurance expert. They understand the unique needs of physicians and can help physicians to go through this process of obtaining life insurance. They can tailor protection for your loved ones. It's just about giving that peace of mind for your family, right? So important. To find out more, go to www.pearsonravitz.com/knock-knock. Again, that's PearsonRavitz.com/knock-knock to get more information on life insurance for physicians. All right, we're back with Dr. Jillian Horton.
So you have mentioned, we're talking about the organizations and, kind of things on the system level. And you're right, there's no cookie cutter approach to this issue, but are there maybe some general guiding principles for organizations to use to move away from the, put the blame on the individual and suggest yoga and resilience? Are there some Is there any kind of checklist anywhere, since that's sort of where people are coming from? Can we meet them there somehow?
Yeah. Love that question. So there are some really great resources, as whether it's people thinking about future leadership roles, people who have some kind of wellness role, or people who are in leadership roles who just want to figure out what is there out there that can tell us where to begin this work, and that the evidence kind of points us in the direction of what is the best investment of our time. The American Medical Association has, as you probably know, these amazing steps forward modules, including amazing modules for organizations looking at, what do I do? Where do I start? Where do I begin? And that's like one resource that people can look at. But if I think of, how do I approach this? Just sort of what is I was going to call it a cookie cutter approach, but that was maybe not quite what I meant. It's definitely not a cookie cutter. It's an artisanal cake, I would say. But where do you start? And I think, again, where I've landed, taking people through that Stanford professional fulfillment model. What do we need if that end goal is fulfillment, not happiness, but fulfillment, not wellness, fulfillment? We know that we need 3 big clusters of things in order as physicians to experience professional fulfillment. One of them is we need a culture of wellness. And people often think, oh, that's like the paint a rock day, or that's
Pizza
like
Friday.
free hot chocolate,
Right.
pizza Friday, or
Yeah.
free muffins. I've written about this term that I call muffin rage,
Yeah.
So those are not culture of wellness things at all. Those are usually symbols that if that's where people start, actually what they're often telling you is they don't understand anything about the problem. So within a culture of wellness, we know that leadership matters more than almost anything else. Is leadership emotionally intelligent? Do leaders listen? Are they good listeners? Do leaders understand, if we're talking about in smaller cohorts, the principle of putting their staff, aligning their staff with the work that their staff find the most meaningful, and making sure there's sort of the number that the literature tells us to aim for there is about 20%, also old work by Tate Shanafelt and colleagues. But, so that piece, it's funny because a lot of what we talk about when we talk about pizza and muffins are tokens of appreciation, but that's just what an organization is thinking we might like as appreciation, as opposed to going out and saying, hey, Kristen, what does appreciation feel like to you? What does it look like to you? There's some organizations that kind of crowdsource that, but as a leader, you can't know that from people if you're not asking that question and listening to the response. And there are little things that have been shown to be surprisingly impactful. Thank you note programs, the opportunity to formally thank colleagues. Hey, will you help me? I had that patient who was enucleated and I felt I didn't know what to do. And you came and you saved his eye and you made me look good. And, thank you. Like that deeply relational component of the work that has been another casualty of, all of our electronic medical record use and communication by electronic device, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the highlights in the culture piece. The piece that everyone is always floored by is the second piece of professional fulfillment, the efficiency of practice. Because when you look at changing how we use an electronic medical record or rolling out big things, we know these are some of the most costly things that organizations can do. They're the most daunting, the most complex. But again, looking at, many organizations are in the process of making changes there, but even other things like prioritizing, FaceTime and relationships. So if we're, if I'm a rheumatologist and you are an ophthalmologist and we're caring for some patients with overlapping illness, we want to make sure that our practices, that we're going to have the opportunity to physically see each other, to talk to each other, not just to be sending each other increasingly impersonal notes. And so those are some of the things within efficiency of practice. Organizations can still do things to promote personal resilience, but that's where I think the messaging is so often just butchered. So if you are, for example, going to support as a university, you want to bring in Jill Horton or some of her colleagues who teach an evidence-based JAMA-published program on mindful practice, and you want to make that available to your staff. Embedded in that offering, you've got to say, this is only one piece. This is the smallest piece. We know that you are not the problem. We also, want to communicate to you. We're working on these other changes. Again, that's where leadership and communication comes in. So many missed opportunities, the feeling that there's like nobody in the cockpit. What do you know about the person at the helm of your organization? What do you know about their values? What do we know about what the plan is in plain, language in terms of what the next priorities are for the next year, as opposed to some strategic plan that looks like this. So I guess to summarize all of that, the criticality of leadership, there's nothing that can correct for leadership that doesn't believe that these things are problems, that isn't highly personable, leaders who aren't good listeners, leaders who are not empathetic, and also, actually have the skills to do these things. But those are some of the other pieces and places where people can start.
Well, I want to thank you for using the term enucleation. I love it. That's good.
I hope that you're going to reciprocate.
I haven't heard that from a non-ophthalmologist and I think ever. So fantastic.
I used to think it was just about nuclear arms, and then I
well,
learned
Jillian,
more ophthalmology.
so I've learned a little bit about you, and I notice in all the strategies we've talked about, one thing that you haven't mentioned is pranking each other in the hospital.
What, me? I
Yeah.
would do that.
Well, I don't know about that. I think I've heard a few things. I heard some stories, and but it does speak to just having fun in general. Like, it's okay to have fun. I'm obviously a big fan of humor. And so tell us about the pager incident, please.
Well, actually, I've found myself even thinking further back to my origin story. When I was in grade 8, we have a Festival du Voyageur in Manitoba. It's a big French festival celebrating the huge aspect of our French culture. And I still remember, because my friends still talk about this, there was a big mural that one of my really talented friends had painted of all the voyageurs in a canoe. And I snuck into the classroom, and in the back of the canoe, I painted sitting a giraffe at the back. And then the teacher came in, and she was so mad. She's like, she's in French. She's like, what the hell is this? And then she waves her finger and she goes, I know who did this. She's like, this has Jillian Horton written all over it. And
awesome.
So I think that was, and I told her it was a voyageur, actually. I thought it was kind of I can't believe historically.
The native giraffes of Canada.
Totally.
The native Canadian giraffes.
Completely. The pager, though, what I think of, all of us getting through internship year, worst year of many of our lives in so many ways. And I had this friend, an amazing friend from the United Arab Emirates, and we would just always try to outdo each other with jokes. And, one day I'd gotten him, I thought it was so good, I'd paged him to the hospital gift shop, and he gets some very nice older lady there, just like, hello. And, my friend is like, I was just paged to this number. And she's like, this is the gift shop, dear. And he was so confused. And so he's like, I'm going to get you. So then about a week later, I get a page, so 4-digit page to my number, and the page is 9911, and it's, 8 p.m. So I answer it unthinkingly, and somebody answers, and they're like, emergency services. And I'm like, yeah, this is Jillian Horton. I was paged to this number. And they're like, sorry. I was like, I was paged to this number. And thinking I'm...
You're like fighting really with the 911 operator.
Oh, yeah. What could be, what's a better use of time than tying up the 911? But I was amazed at how easy it was for him to slip that in. But your comment about humor, you know what it makes me think of? Unless jokes are malicious, which we're not interested in that kind of humor. Right. I think, when it comes to with patients, with each other, with teams, with friends, with colleagues, humor is like a safety signal, isn't it? You don't joke with somebody that you don't like. You don't joke with somebody that you don't care about. It signals, that we're... there's a bond here, a connection. Yeah. I think it's one of the reasons I love the work that both of you do so much. It's part of that collective, it really, I don't think it's possible to state its importance when it comes to building that sense of community and also, just carefully crafted humor that makes people feel seen. It's also like resistance in the best possible way.
Well, I have one point to say about that, but real quick, the hospital next to one of my offices in the gift shop, there is like a 7-foot tall stuffed giraffe.
Will you send it to me?
It's been there. I've worked at this office and been going to that hospital for 8 years now, and it's been there all 8 years. So no one has purchased the 8-foot tall. We're waiting for the right Canadian to come by and just grab it.
We couldn't afford the tariffs now. I can't.
Seriously.
Right. Oh man. But I've over the years I've thought to myself, and Chris and I have talked about this, is like, what exactly with my content, like what about it, like what is it that, because I'm making fun of all these specialties, and I sometimes I'm surprised by how little I like anger the specialties, because people always ask me that. I was like, has anybody do you receive like hate mail from and I'm like, no, I don't. And
I'm just as surprised as you are.
I know. Like, wow. Like, no, the orthopedic surgeons, they love it.
Yeah.
And I've, maybe I took some cheap shots early on just because I was just trying to figure out my voice and how to do medical comedy correctly. But then over the years, I've realized that if you frame it in a way, like you said, that people are being heard by someone that's especially someone who is outside their area of expertise. And it's so they're feeling heard, even though you're making fun of them. They see the truth in it. They see that, okay, this guy really does like get the conflict between cardiology and nephrology. It's when you cross a line into belittling their purpose of what they're doing as a physician. That's when it turns into more bullying and
malicious humor.
It loses its comedic value, especially in the medical field, when we all have jobs that are very, very serious.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think that's the line.
Yeah, and I just thinking about that as you say it, it's exploding the idiosyncrasies as opposed to, like you said, the value or the worth or the contribution. And so often, I think it's just a relief to people, actually, because when we think about the real life tensions that we often experience, they can be malicious. They can be devaluing. They can be, coming from, if we just think of a day in the ward, a snapshot when we see, times when relationships are fraught and people are, talking trash about each other. It's often infused in that. It's not joking about the idiosyncrasies. Embedded in it is, I work harder than you. I'm more important than you. And of course, I think what you, give the window to is, with both of your work, is just a very holistic perspective, and everybody gets a turn to be, examined under that microscope. Everybody's idiosyncrasies exploded
except for
in a way
OBGYN. They keep telling me I don't have enough OBGYN content. I need to do better there. So there's a few blind spots I have.
He's afraid of them. That's really why.
I try to be an equal opportunity ridiculer of the medical profession. So
totally. But what I love about your collective work is also how it's evolved. So again, it really, to me, embodies that idea that, and I know we feel this viscerally, and I think your audience feels this so viscerally, that humor is about so much more than just making people laugh. It's an opportunity for us to say things that sometimes in medicine, and again, this is just what I love about the tonally, your work, people are actually, we have a lot of aversion and fear about speaking out, criticizing. There are a lot of reasons in our profession, as we know, we're kind of conditioned to just be good little soldiers. And, we talked about that in terms of altruism, but it's also in terms of compliance and, oh, yes, I won't challenge this. I won't step out of line. I won't, my mentor, again, back to that, threw something at me. Well, that's just part of the indoctrination. But there's also this social piece, and for us as type A plus 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 people, one of the things that I think is pretty universal in medicine, we say we love feedback, but we hate criticism. We
That's true.
hate it.
Only
Absolutely.
positive
We're
feedback.
such, yeah, like we're such perfectionists that, then if I'm going to make a video and it's going to move into political territory and somebody's going to say, oh, this is wrong. A doctor shouldn't be political. A doctor shouldn't do this. Some people, that has a big chilling effect and they never go there again. So I do think it's what's so powerful about the very unique space that you're both working in. It allows for a lot of, very healthy interrogation of what is my role? What is our role as physicians? We have a lot of privilege. Our voices carry a lot of weight. How could it be true that we can't weigh in? I always use that example of the New England Journal, the first time in 208 years that they weighed in on a presidential election was 8 years ago. And many people going, wow, that's so amazing. And to me, the amazing thing was, how could that have taken 208 years? How could there have never been a time, when our profession said, hey, we might have different views about certain things, but there are certain things that we stand for that we're supposed to be advocating for. How can it be true that we can't move into this space? And again, we all have in Canada charter rights for freedom of speech and freedom of ideas, but there surely must be things that we've been sheltering ourselves from saying. And that's, again, the work that the two of you are doing, moving into the space, talking about the insurance system and training and everything else. How can it not be incumbent on us at this moment to use the power and the platforms that we have to say those things that, yes, sometimes they're uncomfortable, but it always goes better than you think, right? Like what you said about hate mail is super interesting.
Yeah. It's there's definitely ways to do it, and it's just this cohort of people, healthcare workers. It's just such a unique job, and sometimes it's you got to treat it delicately, but also we all need to be free to express ourselves.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of people don't feel they have that ability.
Yeah.
Like you said, just based on work environment, leadership, and how they're, thinking about all of this that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So, but storytelling is so, that's all I do on social media, right? All my skits, it's all storytelling.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And that's so incredibly important with advocacy, with humor, with just creating bonds with people. And your book, I want to definitely, mention your fantastic book, We Are All Perfectly Fine, A Memoir of Love, Medicine, and Healing. And you have a lot of storytelling in there, obviously your own personal story. And we're always telling our story. We have a very
Ad
interesting
nauseam.
story all
Yes,
the time.
you sure do.
And it has a way of reaching people. And so I definitely encourage people to check out that book, We Are All Perfectly Fine. And you're working on a second book, is that right?
I am. Yes, I'm devastated to discover that writing a second book is no easier than writing a first book.
Yeah.
It's probably kind of like doing a second fellowship. Yeah, it's excruciating actually. But I am moving forward, and that storytelling piece for us. It's interesting, right? Because as you say, it's our most powerful mechanism for connection. It's sort of on one level what we trade in on our best days all day long. But so often there's this, and I also love how you framed it. I mean, not everybody has the same level of safety, of ability to speak out. As we get older, that gets a little easier, I think, for all of us. But I
think you just stop caring as much.
You do stop caring.
Yes.
You go, what's the worst thing that could happen? You're going to fire me? That would be fabulous.
Exactly.
I can open that coffee shop I've always dreamed about.
A little more at stake when you're a resident.
Right. That's right.
Totally. But it's that conflict too between this idea. It's another thing I'd love to talk about, going back to, supporting learners and shaping culture, this idea of professionalism. There are for sure people who would say the kind of stories that I tell, the kind of videos that, you make, they would say, that's not professional. We have adhered for bizarre reasons, frankly, to this crazy rigid definition of professionalism that many people have rightly interpreted as, I have to check who I am at the door. I was teaching a class, I was teaching mindful practice for 3 weeks, actually, to an amazing group of Med 4 students for the last 3 weeks. It's one of the highlights of my year. And one student shared a story, because I asked them to talk about a time when their basic human instincts came into conflict with what they had been taught was a definition of professionalism. And the story that she shared was a patient who had a craving for some fresh fruit instead of the whatever food-like substance it is that we serve in the hospital. And so she'd heard this for a couple of days in a row, and she had an apple in her lunch. And then she was like, I'm going to give him my apple. And she took him the apple. And then for the rest of the afternoon, she described worrying that maybe she'd done something that could get her in trouble, that was unprofessional, that would be reprimanded. And, the three of us would love to say, that could never happen. But it could happen. There is somebody somewhere who could say, "What are you doing? Giving that 30-cent apple? That's a
not
gift.
appropriate.
Don't you know that's crossing a boundary." Yeah, it's a gift. Yeah, this is one of these it's a kind of crazy making that we've done, I think, right? That's then resulted in people saying, well, gee, if I can't do that, can I write an op-ed saying that our current policy towards people living with addiction is horrible? Can I share a personal story about my disabled sister in my case, or in your case, giving CPR and how transformative that was, or your personal story of your own health challenges? It's really created this kind of uncertainty that I think has actually made us far less interesting as people on the other side of clinical encounters, has made us, then wonder why we're lonely. It's like if you have a neighbor that you find out everything about your neighbor, but then the neighbor's like, and how are you doing? It's like, oh, I can't tell you anything about myself. We all recognize that'd be weird. That's not a healthy, bidirectional, balanced relationship. And so it's as if we've suggested that the calibration for these things should be based on, the maybe 2 to 4% people who actually do have boundary issues and not the best judgment and are going to have problems with these kinds of things. We've taken those people and inflated, the teaching for everyone else, so that what the end result is, we have amazing, caring young people who are afraid to do the most basic human things at the bedside, lest they be accused of this horrible, scary thing, unprofessionalism, for completely absurd reasons. I think it's another thing that we're really needing to, that your work addresses, in my view, as well. It shows that this is another way that you can be yourself in a public lab.
It's okay to be human and a doctor.
Yeah.
Yes.
We don't need anything to make it. And we're
Yes.
as Kristen knows, ophthalmologists in particular are the most interesting people on earth. Right?
I've heard
So-
that. Yes.
Yeah.
So we should be able
That's
to.
evidence-based.
Absolutely. We
actually.
should be able to show that. I don't have time to give the citation right now. But anyway.
Well, it'll be in the show notes.
Well, Jillian, we want to just thank you so much for joining us. And tell us, you guys, so we mentioned the second book. What else do you have going on? Let the people know.
Oh, well, the coolest thing right now, actually, is the We Are All Perfectly Fine is being has been optioned as a television series
Yes,
and
that
is
is
in
so
development.
cool.
That's awesome.
Yes, it's crazy, amazing. And so in a little while, we'll be able to say more about that and where and with who. But that's
really
another thing I never thought I'd be doing. But it makes me think of your work. It's an opportunity to knowledge translate our experiences in a way that I hope will make people not only make other healthcare workers feel more seen, but also help the public understand the ways in which our well-being is interdependent. And that's
well,
my
good
next
luck with that. That's an
cool
awesome
thing.
project. I look forward to seeing
Thank
that
you.
and reading your next
Thank
book.
you.
And people can find you on Twitter, Blue Sky, Insta, Jillian Horton, MD. And also, are you still writing? You're still probably writing op-eds and things.
I am. I do. I just this past year have done a little bit less writing of that kind, as I've tried to
Very busy.
Get the work done on other work that I do here, obviously on my day job, and get the book underway in the TV series. But yeah, I love writing for mainstream media. And I think the more of us who do that kind of work as well, the better. And just before we end, I just want to say thank you so much to both of you. Firstly, for having me with you. It's just when my publicist messaged that you'd reached out and she said, this sounds like it could be good. I wrote her back and I was like, you don't understand. They are medical royalty. Okay. This is like the queen inviting me in our world. So this is, but also, I
should be wearing a cape everywhere I go.
Oh,
and
you
a
were at
crown
the
and
start.
a scepter. And,
we had to take that off right before we hit record.
No, that's right. You were and I really appreciated it. But right. I just also want to thank both of you for your work and your voice. It is so important. It's so humanizing to our profession. I think it's allowed so many people to see, the urgency of being yourself in these jobs, that it's, and that you can also forge unusual paths. That it's possible that every part of yourself, there's very unusual. You are the only two who kind of make my career path look not so abnormal, I think, that I feel like deep alignment with you.
Thanks.
But I think that's really important as well for people to see that those other pieces of themselves, that we can find a way to work them into who we are and actually do incredible things, as opposed to the old idea of just parking them at the door and this has to eat your life and that's the end. We need this kind of work in medicine. It's knowledge translation, it's culture changing. And it's been just a thrill to spend this time with you both.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. Keep up the great work.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Well, that was fascinating discussion.
It was so fun. I could talk to her forever.
Yeah, let us know what you thought. If you guys have any thoughts on burnout, whether or not you roll your eyes when you hear the word burnout. I'm glad we got into some of that stuff. And that's always bothered me.
Yeah.
Just the how nobody really, doesn't take care around that word anymore.
Right.
And it's
become just a token, like she was saying.
I like the fulfillment thing. That makes a lot of sense. You can email us knockknockhi@human-content.com. Visit us on our social media platforms. Hang out with us and the wonderful Human Content Podcast family on Instagram and TikTok at Human Content Pods. Thanks to all the listeners leaving feedback and reviews. Don't we love those reviews?
We do.
The good ones.
Absolutely.
They're mostly
constructive feedback is welcome as well.
Absolutely. If you subscribe and comment on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube, we can give you a shout out. Like we have a review from Cats and Churros, Chris.
Oh, I would like to know more.
Says the podcast is informative and entertaining. I really enjoy Knock Knock Hippocrates, particularly the Knock Knock Eye episodes. It's fascinating to learn about the eyes and hear Dr. Glockenflecken geek out about ophthalmology.
I'm glad someone thinks so.
His personality brings a lightness to even serious topics and makes it a fun listen.
That is,
I have a lightness.
You do, and I think that is accurate feedback, and you somehow make eyeballs interesting to people. So that is a feat.
It'll be a feat whenever Kristen actually listens to the Knock Knock Eye episodes. That's when you get enough.
Have I not given enough to the eyeball community?
Full video episodes are up every week on our YouTube channel at Glockenfleckens. We also have a newsletter.
That's right.
Yep. And we also have a Patreon. Lots of cool perks, bonus episodes, react to medical shows and movies, hang out with other members of the Knock Knock High community. We're there. Early ad-free episode access, interactive Q&A live stream events. We just did one the other day.
Yes. Always fun.
Oh, we get into some crazy topics.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's kind
we
of
talked at
unhinged.
length about my testicles.
We did.
Or my lack thereof. Patreon.com/Glockenflecken. Or you can find out about Patreon and our newsletter and everything, tours, like the live shows we're doing on our website, Glockenflecken.com. Speaking of Patreon community perks, let's do this. All right. New member shout out, Henry H., David D., Marcia, and Nastaran S. If I'm saying it incorrectly, please send us an email because I want to make sure I get your name right. Thank you all for joining us on Patreon. Shout out to the Jonathans as usual. Patrick, Lucia C., Edward K., Marion W., Mr. Granddaddy, Caitlin C., Brianna L., MP Cole, Mary H., Keith G., Parker, Muhammad L., David H., Kaylee A., Gabe, Gary M., Eric B., Marlene S., Scott M., Kelsey M., Dr. Hoover, Sean M., Hawkeye MD, Bubbly Salt, and
Shanity.
Patreon roulette time. Random shout out to someone on the emergency medicine tier. Ashley K. Thank you for being a patron.
It's Ashley K.
And thank you for listening. We're your hosts, Will and Christopher Planey, also known as the Glockoplecans. Special thanks to our guest today, Dr. Jillian Horton. Our executive producers are Will Planey, Kristen Planey, Aaron Cordy, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brick. Editor, engineers, Jason Portiz. Our music is by Omer Ben-Zvi. To learn about Knock Knock Hi's program, disclaimer, ethics, policies, submission, verification, licensing terms, and HIPAA release terms, you can go to glockandplankin.com or reach out to us, Knock Knock Hi at human-content.com with questions, concerns, or fun medical puns. Knock Knock Hi is a human content production.
Knock, knock, goodbye.
Hey, Kristen, are you good at multitasking?
I mean, as good as you can be. I don't think it's ever like super effective.
Yeah, and a lot of physicians are being asked to multitask
Yeah,
all the time.
it's true.
You're on the computer, you're typing away, you're looking at labs, you're trying to listen to the patient, you're doing all these things. That's just, it's not effective.
Yeah.
Well, it can help though, you know?
What?
Microsoft Dragon Copilot.
That can help.
Yes, absolutely. This is your AI assistant for workflow and documentation. It helps automate tasks. Right? You can summarize notes and evidence, prep your orders. It can draft referral letters.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And with after visit summaries as well. You get an after
Oh,
visit
yeah.
summary.
I do. I always read them too.
Yeah.
I'm a very
so
good student.
Microsoft Dragon Copilot can help you make that.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I wish I had one of these things for like my job.
Yeah.
That'd be really nice.
Running Glockenflecken.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to make it where you are, presentable to the world.
Absolutely. To learn more about Microsoft Dragon Copilot, visit aka.ms/knockknockhi. That's aka.ms/knockknockhi. Thanks for watching the episode. You can find more on that playlist over there. If you prefer to listen or you just had your eyes dilated, you can binge full episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Or join the party over on Patreon, where you get early access episodes, hang out with us, get lots of exclusive bonus content. Help you subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think.